Every XLM holder will be shocked by this, what the media won't say. Everyone holding XLM right now is missing something. And I don't just mean a little detail. I mean the entire narrative behind Stellar's transformation, one that's being intentionally ignored by the mainstream media, crypto influencers, and even some of the loudest voices on X. While the headlines are chasing dog coins, celebrity meme pumps, and layer 2 hype trains, something far more consequential is happening right under their noses. And it's happening inside Stellar's ecosystem. This isn't your typical altcoin bounce or next cycle potential. This is a complete architectural shift in how real-world assets, money, and compliance-ready liquidity flow across chains, and it's being built not on hype, but on infrastructure. And still, almost no one is talking about it. The media has a blind spot, or maybe it's worse, a deliberate blackout. Because the moment this narrative breaks through, the entire crypto space will have to reevaluate everything they thought they knew about Stellar. Here's what they're not telling you. Billion-dollar banks are already tapping into Stellar's rails. Enterprise-grade stablecoins are being issued through regulated cross-border corridors. And yes, smart contract functionality, once dismissed as never gonna happen on Stellar, is now live through Sorabon and outperforming expectations. That's not some roadmap fantasy. That's live code, live pilots, real traction. And here's what should absolutely shock every single XLM holder. This shift, it isn't coming. It's already happening. Right now. Behind the scenes. Backed by real integrations, enterprise partners, and data that no one wants to amplify because it doesn't sell headlines. But let's be blunt. If you're sitting on XLM thinking, oh, I'll wait until the next bull cycle to see if it pumps, you've already missed the point. This isn't about chasing the next green candle. It's about recognizing when the plumbing of the next generation financial system is being laid, and realizing Stellar is right there, laying it. Let me break it down. Sorabon, Stellar's smart contract layer, is not only live, it's attracting serious developer interest from institutions that never wanted to touch DeFi before. We're talking KYC compliant, gas efficient, WASM-powered smart contracts tailor-made for finance. Palago Labs, the quiet power player building real-world DeFi on Stellar, is already executing tokenized trade finance solutions that move multimillion-dollar volumes between businesses, not speculators. Entities like Franklin Templeton, already using Stellar to custody and move tokenized US Treasuries on-chain. MoneyGram, built out crypto fiat ramps across over 180 countries, directly on Stellar. Circle, they didn't just mention Stellar, they launched USDC natively on Stellar's rails. That's enterprise-grade liquidity flowing in and out of traditional finance, permissioned and programmable. These aren't hypotheticals. They're live. They're moving capital. And the network metrics are starting to reflect it, even if no one's broadcasting the signal. Quiet surges in transaction throughput. More contract deployments and dev activity in Q1 2025 than the previous 3 years combined. New regulatory compliant on-off ramps being spun up globally. So let me say this again for every XLM holder out there. If you still think Stellar is just the old remittance chain from 2018, wake up. That version of Stellar is gone. What we have now is something entirely different. This is a financial rail system for the tokenized future, one that prioritizes speed without sacrificing compliance. DeFi tools without the chaos of unregulated yield farms. Institutional-grade liquidity backed by assets like stablecoins and tokenized treasuries. And perhaps most critically, a developer stack that traditional finance can actually use. And still, the media stays silent. Why? Because this isn't a sexy meme coin with 10,000% gains overnight. This is real infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't go parabolic on a Tuesday afternoon. Until it does. Because when the institutions flip the switch, when tokenized real-world assets need a secure, fast, regulated path to move across borders in seconds, not days, and when the billions in idle capital that's waiting on the sidelines finally starts flowing into tokenized treasuries, compliant DeFi, and instant settlement FX, Stellar is going to look like it went from zero to hero overnight. But you and I will know the truth. It didn't happen overnight. It was engineered. It was intentional. It was built quietly while everyone else was watching the wrong coins. So, if you're here for Moonboy narratives and 100x lotto tickets, you're gonna miss what Stellar's really doing. But if you're here because you care about real adoption, real value, and crypto infrastructure that's actually being used, then this is the story you need to understand. Because this next cycle is not about hype. It's about who's building the foundation of the next financial system. And Stellar's not asking for attention. They're letting the results speak. If you're not here for hype, but for real crypto fundamentals, smash that subscribe button right now. This is Be Crypto Smart, and we cover the things no one else will. Now, let's dig into what's actually happening under the surface because the smart money already knows. The question is, will you? You've probably heard about Sorabon by now, Stellar's native smart contract platform. And if you're like most of the crypto space, you probably assumed it was Stellar finally catching up to Ethereum. But let's get one thing straight. If that's your mindset, you're completely missing the entire point. Sorabon wasn't built to clone Ethereum. It wasn't designed to chase TVL, mimic Solidity, or copy-paste the DeFi blueprint. Sorabon is something entirely different. It's not about playing catch-up. It's about redefining the game. It's about rebuilding smart contracts from the ground up with a single goal: to serve the real financial system. This is not DeFi 2.0. This is RealFi 1.0. A smart contract engine not optimized for memes or token speculation, but for institutions, for regulatory compliance, and for global capital markets. Where Ethereum built a wide-open sandbox, Sorabon is building a launchpad, one governed by structure, compliance, and real-world enforceability. Ethereum brought innovation. Stellar, with Sorabon, brings integration. And that difference isn't subtle. It's a tectonic shift. Smart contracts on Sorabon aren't just programmable money, they're programmable trust. They can enforce legal identity, integrate KYC, respect jurisdictional boundaries, and execute logic that financial institutions actually need. These contracts aren't trying to disintermediate the system. They're rebuilding it with safeguards and rails that banks, fintechs, and regulators can plug directly into. Let me give you a real example of what that looks like in motion: Palago Labs. Palago is one of the first startups building directly on Sorabon. But this isn't another DeFi clone. They're not here to launch another yield farm, pump liquidity pools, or play the same AMM game. Palago is targeting one of the most broken and underserved systems in global finance: trade credit. Here's the problem. Cross-border trade is a $5 trillion market, but it's riddled with friction. Invoices are still processed manually. Payments take weeks. Small businesses can't access credit. And institutional lenders don't have the infrastructure to fund these transactions at scale. That's where Sorabon changes everything. Palago is using Sorabon to tokenize trade receivables, turning unpaid invoices into programmable on-chain assets. With smart contracts, they can automate invoice-based lending, enforce credit terms, and build real-time risk profiles, all without middlemen. Lenders can plug directly into a compliant framework that governs how capital flows between buyer and seller, and those flows are transparent, auditable, and instant. This isn't a white paper fantasy. Palago is already live, funded, built, operational, and it's running on Sorabon. That matters, because it proves something most chains can't. Sorabon isn't just capable of supporting real-world finance. It already is. Stellar didn't just bolt on DeFi. It's creating a new category, DeFi for enterprise. Liquidity isn't just pooled. It's deployed directly into use cases with real economic value. This is infrastructure that actually works for capital markets, and Sorabon is at the heart of it. And here's the part the media isn't telling you. The number of Sorabon native projects is growing quietly. Grant funding is flowing in. Developer activity is increasing. Real-world pilots are going live. While everyone's distracted chasing whatever Ethereum Layer 2 launches next, Sorabon is onboarding the next generation of builders, those who are here to solve trillion-dollar problems, not farm token emissions. Sorabon was built differently, and it functions differently. Ethereum gave birth to an ecosystem where anything goes, but Sorabon was built for when everything must go right. And that's not just a technical choice, it's a strategic one. Let's get into the architecture. Sorabon runs on WebAssembly, not EVM. That means developers can build in mainstream languages without reinventing the wheel. It opens the door to tens of thousands of enterprise developers who've never touched Solidity and never will. It's familiar, secure, and production-ready. More importantly, it allows for deeper integration with existing business systems, CRMs, accounting platforms, compliance tools. All the back-end logic that institutions already use is bridgeable now. That's a massive unlock. And because it runs alongside Stellar's core payment network, it doesn't just support smart contract logic. It supports smart capital movement. That's the part Ethereum missed. Ethereum separated contract execution from real-world money. Sorabon combines both right there at layer 1. But what really sets Sorabon apart is the compliance layer. Can enforce identity, can restrict access, can respect legal jurisdiction. You can build contracts that only execute if both parties are verified. You can create tokens that can't move unless they meet specific regulatory rules. You can even auto-report transactions for audit or compliance purposes, all without oracles, plugins, or middleware. It's programmable finance that actually fits inside the rulebook. That's why institutions are taking it seriously. Look at who's already in the Stellar ecosystem. Franklin Templeton is tokenizing US Treasuries. Circle's USDC is issuing directly on Stellar. MoneyGram is live with cash-in/cash out across 180 countries. That's not vapor. That's operational infrastructure already tied to billions in flow. And now with Sorabon, these flows can be automated, governed, and expanded through compliant contracts. This is the missing piece. For years, institutions were interested in blockchain but hesitant to touch smart contracts. The tools just weren't there. Solidity was too risky. Ethereum's cost model was too volatile. DeFi was too chaotic. Sorabon changes that. Now they have a platform where contracts are predictable, auditable, and integrated with compliant money movement. Now they can build automated credit issuance, cross-border lending logic, collateralized stablecoin rails, all governed by code they can legally and operationally trust. And here's the thing, retail investors aren't watching any of this. They're not reading devlogs. They're not tracking grants. They're not mapping out real-world volume behind invoice lending protocols. They're just watching the price chart. But by the time Sorabon gets a headline on Bloomberg or CoinDesk, the opportunity will already be gone. That's the alpha. Sorabon isn't built for hype. It's built for institutions. And those institutions are already stepping in, not with press releases but with quiet pilots, smart integrations, and long-term capital planning. So if you're still looking at Sorabon like it's just Stellar's version of Ethereum, you've already missed the narrative. Ethereum brought innovation. Stellar, with Sorabon, is bringing integration. And that shift from innovation to integration is what separates speculative chains from infrastructure chains. Sorabon isn't another DeFi playground. It's the financial engine the old world has been waiting for. And it's running right now under the radar. And here's where it gets even more serious. Because what's powering this new engine, what's giving Sorabon its early traction and proving the real-world use case for Stellar's infrastructure, isn't just theoretical interest from enterprises. It's execution, real deployments, real rails, and most importantly, real partners. Let's talk about Palago Labs again. But this time let's go deeper, because Palago isn't just some startup experimenting with Sorabon smart contracts. They're doing something that almost no one in crypto has managed to do successfully. They're bridging capital markets with programmable trust. And they're doing it with enterprise credibility. Palago is attacking the most overlooked, least sexy, but most economically critical layer of global finance, trade credit. It's not flashy. It's not meme-worthy. But it's the backbone of $5 trillion in global commerce. And the current system? A mess, full of paperwork, delays, counterparty risk, and credit bottlenecks that cripple small to mid-sized suppliers who are the lifeblood of global trade. Here's the genius of what Palago is doing with Sorabon. They're tokenizing these receivables, transforming what used to be an unpaid invoice into a programmable financial asset. One that can be verified, financed, tracked, and settled on-chain. No Excel sheets, no emails, no 5-week settlement window, Just programmable cash flows governed by smart contracts that execute based on real-world delivery terms. Imagine a shipping container lands in Singapore. Goods are verified. That verification automatically triggers a payment release from a liquidity provider in Germany. The entire thing executed through a Sorabon contract that references KYC-verified parties and regulatory-approved terms. That's not DeFi. That's RealFi. And it's live. Now, what does that mean for Stellar? It means Sorabon isn't just being used. It's being trusted by real companies to govern real capital. That's an insane leap forward. Because let's not forget, Stellar used to be dismissed as just a payments chain. Fast, cheap, good for remittances, but limited. No DeFi ecosystem, no smart contracts, no composability, just a fast layer 1 mostly flying under the radar. Now, that narrative is dead. With Sorabon, Stellar's gone from fast money movement to programmable finance for institutions. It's not about speed anymore, it's about scale, composability, compliance, and modular infrastructure. And the key word here is compliance. Because every financial institution dipping its toes into crypto today is doing so with one fear in mind: regulatory blowback. They don't want another FTX. They don't want to touch a network that gets rugged, forked, or front-run by bots. They want systems that can be audited, contracts that behave predictably, assets that can be blocked, recovered, and reported in accordance with law. That's the world Sorabon was built for. And it's why what we're seeing now, projects like Palago, integrations with Circle's USDC, partnerships with MoneyGram and Franklin Templeton, it's not random. It's coordinated. It's a full-stack capital infrastructure play, and it's playing out right under the market's nose. Because here's what most people still don't understand. Stellar doesn't just want to be a crypto solution. It wants to be the bridge between crypto and capital markets. And bridges don't need hype. They need trust, compliance, reliability, audit trails, legal clarity. That's what Sorabon offers. Now think about what happens as more projects like Palago spin up. It starts with tokenized invoices, then trade finance, then credit markets, then real estate, then payroll flows, then supply chain collateral. All of it operating under the same framework, regulated smart contracts running on a compliant layer 1 with direct connections to fiat off-ramps and on-chain liquidity. That's not a narrative. That's an inevitability. Because capital doesn't chase headlines, it chases rails. And Sorabon is the rail system they've been waiting for. Let's zoom out. For years, Ethereum and its Layer 2 ecosystem have dominated smart contract narratives. And yes, innovation has exploded. But let's be real, how much of that innovation is actually usable by institutions? How many contracts on Arbitrum or Optimism are fully auditable, compliant with FATF rules, or capable of integrating into Swift standardized workflows? Exactly. Meanwhile, Sorabon is already supporting contracts that enforce KYC rules, already enabling token flows that adhere to cross-border tax reporting structures, already building the logic for regulated credit. It's not about hype. It's about who's building for the next phase of finance. Because here's what no one in the crypto media seems to realize. The next wave of blockchain adoption isn't going to be retail. It's going to be enterprise. And enterprise doesn't care about your airdrops. Cares about reliability, legal clarity, partner networks, proven integrations. That's why Sorabon is such a problem for Ethereum. Because Ethereum can't pivot into compliance fast enough. Its entire culture is built on decentralization maximalism, not regulatory harmonization. And while that makes it great for innovation, it's terrible for enterprise adoption. Stellar isn't trying to be everything to everyone. It's focused. It's deliberate. It's building a compliance-first smart contract framework that actually integrates with capital markets. And that's exactly what makes Sorabon dangerous. Because by the time the headlines catch on, it won't just be Palago. It'll be a full ecosystem of regulated financial logic running across real-world workflows, powered by Sorabon, secured by Stellar, and invisible to the retail trader watching meme charts on their phone. And here's the kicker. Every single one of these projects, Palago included, is using XLM as part of the execution layer. That means utility. That means volume. That means network demand tied not to speculation, but to throughput. The kind of throughput that doesn't just spike, it sustains. So if you're still wondering when XLM is going to wake up, maybe you're asking the wrong question. Because it's not asleep. It's building. Quietly. Strategically. And when that liquidity switch flips, when trade receivables, tokenized cash flows, and credit markets all start settling through Sorabon contracts on stellar rails, it won't be a slow burn. It'll look like an overnight explosion. But you'll know the truth. It didn't happen by accident. It wasn't just market momentum. It was the inevitable result of infrastructure built to serve the next era of finance. And it all starts with what Sorabon is proving right now, long before the rest of the market catches on. Let's talk about something most people ignore, because it's not flashy enough for headlines and not meme-worthy enough for influencers. On-chain data. While crypto Twitter obsesses over speculation, hype cycles, and which token is pumping 30% in an hour, Stellar is quietly laying down metrics that scream one thing louder than any chart ever could. Real demand is building. Not retail hype. Not speculative pump-and-dump cycles. Not short-term momentum chasing. But organic, infrastructure-level activity, driven by real-world usage and institutional testing. Let's start with the facts. In April 2025, Stellar's 24-hour on-chain trading volume spiked past $152 million, marking the highest sustained surge the network has seen since the 2021 bull run. And yet, there was no major price breakout, no influencer campaign, no speculative hype narrative. Which begs the question, where is all this volume coming from? That's what separates smart investors from passive spectators. Because when you dig into the chain and really analyze the flows, it becomes clear this wasn't just exchange-driven churn. This was ecosystem-driven activity. A massive portion of that April volume came from actual real-world stablecoin usage, namely USDC movement across Stellar's rails, especially in cross-border corridors tied to MoneyGram, Circle, and the growing number of fiat on/off-ramp partners. And that's just the surface. Zoom in further and you'll find a spike in volume directly related to Sorabon test deployments, as developers simulate smart contract logic, mint test assets, move funds across accounts, and initiate mock lending flows tied to real business logic. But there's more. That same week in April, when volume exploded, Palago Labs quietly ramped up activity on their trade finance pilot, injecting liquidity into programmable receivables contracts deployed on Sorabon. So, while traders were scratching their heads asking why XLM price wasn't moving, behind the scenes, the chain was surging with non-speculative flows. That's the kind of divergence you only see in one scenario. Smart money is moving in before the narrative catches up. Now let's talk wallets. New Stellar wallet activations are outpacing their 2021 peak, and they're doing it without retail FOMO. That's a staggering signal. Because in 2021, we had full-blown mania. TikTok hype, Elon tweets, Coinbase retail madness. Wallets were being spun up left and right by speculators chasing price. Now, none of that exists. There's no frenzy, no buzz, and yet wallet creation is accelerating. Why? Because institutions, developers, and ecosystem partners are quietly deploying infrastructure. New rails are going live. New corridors are being activated. Liquidity routes are being prepared. Smart contract logic is being tested and wrapped into real use cases. This is how it always starts. Before price moves, structure does. The plumbing comes first. Because when the wave of real usage hits, the network has to be ready to support it. Liquidity has to be in place. Wallets have to be provisioned. Cross-chain flows have to be mapped out. And Stellar is quietly doing all of that. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Most traders look at price and volume as signals of retail sentiment. But in the world of compliant blockchain finance, volume tells a very different story. Especially when you consider XLM's role in the ecosystem. Because every time a Sorabon contract executes, every time a cross-border payment is settled, every time USDC is bridged through the network, XLM gets used, powers fees, it anchors trust, it moves value, it lubricates liquidity. So when you see a multi-week spike in on-chain volume, And none of it is hype-driven. It points to one thing: underlying utility is growing. And here's the kicker most people still don't realize. XLM has a fixed supply. It's not like fiat. It's not like Ethereum with EIP 1559 burn offsetting issuance. It's not like Solana where validators vote to inflate the token to cover costs. XLM is capped. The inflation faucet is closed. The supply is known, immutable, predictable. That means every single uptick in usage, every contract, every stablecoin bridge, every payment corridor puts pressure on a supply base that isn't growing. That's the perfect recipe for a future supply shock. But unlike meme coins, this shock won't come from hype. It'll come from economic activity, measured, tracked, and executed in real time by businesses and institutions using Stellar to move real money. Let's zoom out again. Think about what we're actually watching here. We're seeing a blockchain network with years of under-the-radar development, now finally entering its scaling phase. A phase where smart contracts are going live. Real-world businesses like Palago are onboarding. Fiat ramps like MoneyGram are pushing volume. Stablecoins like USDC are surging in usage. Wallet growth is outpacing bull market highs. And on-chain volume is spiking without any help from hype. And still, no one is talking about it. That's the moment before momentum. The quiet before the storm that every cycle has. Because here's what happens next, guaranteed. As real-world deployments continue and the metrics keep climbing, the media will eventually notice. They'll run headlines like, "Institutional money finds a home on Stellar. Why XLM is suddenly surging. The smart contract chain built for compliance is finally paying off. But by then, the smart money will already be in." The on-chain volume is telling you the truth right now, even if the market isn't listening yet. And here's why that matters. You can't fake organic demand. You can manipulate price. You can manufacture volume on exchanges. You can pump headlines and generate buzz. But you can't fake sustained on-chain activity tied to smart contract usage and real stablecoin flows. That kind of growth is sticky. It doesn't vanish overnight. It compounds. Because institutions don't pull liquidity once they've integrated a payment rail. Developers don't abandon smart contracts once they've embedded them into business logic. And trade networks don't unplug tokenized receivables once they've streamlined financing through programmable contracts. Once these systems are in place, they stay in place. And with every additional deployment, with every new business use case, XLM becomes more deeply embedded in the transaction layer of enterprise crypto. That's what on-chain data is screaming right now. It's not screaming hype. It's screaming, infrastructure is ready. Liquidity is flowing. The base layer is locking in. So while the market debates whether Bitcoin will hold $95,000, or whether meme coins have one more leg up, the actual value flows are already positioning. And XLM is not waiting for permission. It's executing. So if you're still tracking headlines instead of watching on-chain fundamentals, you're not late. But you're behind the people who already understand what this kind of silent activity always leads to. The setup is clear. Supply, fixed. Volume rising. Wallet growth, accelerating. Real-world usage, live and scaling. Speculation, minimal. Utility, increasing. This isn't the kind of growth that fades. This is the kind of growth that erupts. And by the time the charts finally reflect what's happening under the surface, it'll already be too late to position at the bottom. Because the metrics don't lie. But most people ignore them, right until they can't. Why BlackRock, Circle, and the IMF are quietly watching Stellar. Let's take the blinders off for a second and stop thinking like retail investors. Because while most of the market is still chasing hype coins and getting wrecked by volatility, Stellar is positioning itself at the intersection of three unstoppable forces: regulatory clarity, global finance modernization, and the tokenization of real-world assets. And if that sentence alone doesn't make your ears perk up, you might be holding the wrong assets. Let's talk about what's really happening behind closed doors across conference tables and inside the boardrooms of the IMF, the World Bank, BlackRock, and major payment giants. Stellar isn't just trying to partner with banks. It's not begging for retail attention. It's not launching flashy layer 2s or trying to spin up Ponzi incentives for TVL. It's not interested in hype. Stellar is doing something very different. It's embedding itself directly into the plumbing of global finance. The kind of integration that takes years of quiet lobbying, diplomatic dialogue, regulatory alignment, and compliance-first engineering. The kind of strategic positioning that doesn't make headlines until it's too late to ignore. Let's connect the dots because most people won't. In late 2023, Stellar CEO Donell Dixon was invited to speak on a panel hosted by the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank. The subject? Digital public infrastructure. Ask yourself, why was she there? Because Stellar isn't viewed as just another blockchain. It's seen by policymakers as a neutral, scalable, regulatory-aligned payments layer, capable of handling CBDC interoperability, stablecoin settlements, and cross-border capital flows without breaking compliance or decentralization principles. Let that sink in. While Ethereum is still wrestling with gas fees and regulatory categorization, while Solana is fighting uptime issues and pump narratives, Stellar is being evaluated by central banks as a base layer technology for real-world monetary systems. That's not a crypto partnership. That's monetary infrastructure-level trust. And if you think that trust happened overnight, you haven't been paying attention. The Stellar Development Foundation has been building these relationships for years, not on Twitter, but in real-world capital corridors. With MoneyGram to build cash-in/cash-out USDC infrastructure in 180 countries. With UNHCR to distribute aid directly to refugees using blockchain wallets. With Palau to issue their national digital currency on the Stellar network. With Circle to support USDC movement on one of only 3 chains trusted for regulated deployments. And let's zoom in on that last one, because Circle's trust in Stellar speaks volumes. USDC is now under a regulatory microscope. The U.S. government is moving to reclassify stablecoin issuers as systemically important financial entities. Circle is bracing for stress tests, capital requirements, and increased scrutiny from the Fed, the OCC, and international equivalents. So what does Circle do? It leans on Stellar, a blockchain engineered for transparency, compliance, and low-friction fiat interoperability. Think about it. Stellar doesn't need a layer 2 to scale. It doesn't need a workaround to be fast. It doesn't sacrifice decentralization for throughput. It just works, and it works in a way that doesn't threaten regulators. That's why Circle continues to move USDC volume on Stellar, despite having other technically superior chains available. Because Stellar offers regulatory palatability, a word most crypto projects can't even spell, let alone implement. Now let's pull the camera back even further to BlackRock. Why does this matter? Because BlackRock has indirect exposure to Stellar through its relationship with Franklin Templeton. And if you didn't know, Franklin Templeton is running tokenized money market funds on Stellar. Real funds, with real clients, backed by real dollars, deployed on-chain. This isn't a beta. It's not theoretical. These funds are already being tokenized on Stellar, creating one of the first regulated, tokenized capital market instruments that lives natively on a public blockchain. And guess what? BlackRock owns a stake in Franklin Templeton. So if you follow the capital stack, BlackRock has direct interest in seeing Stellar succeed. Not because they're buying XLM, but because they want the underlying financial rails to be secure, scalable, and interoperable. And Stellar is delivering exactly that. Ask yourself, what happens when more funds follow Franklin's model? What happens when asset managers tokenize more products and realize they need a blockchain that can handle real-time settlement, 24/7 transferability, near zero fees, and full compliance visibility? They're not going to Ethereum, where gas fees can spike unpredictably. They're not going to Solana, where outages still create reliability concerns. They're going to networks that don't just talk compliance, they're built for it. And right now, Stellar is one of the only ones with live integrations that prove it can handle that kind of capital market use case at scale. This is why the IMF is watching. This is why BlackRock is indirectly involved. This is why Circle keeps doubling down. Because Stellar isn't trying to win the DeFi race. It's trying to replace the settlement layer of international finance. Let's talk CBDCs. While retail Twitter is still fighting over whether CBDCs are good or evil, Stellar is working behind the scenes to create the rails that make CBDCs interoperable across borders. That's the holy grail. Right now, most CBDC initiatives are siloed. Every country is developing their own prototype, their own ledger, their own rules. But money doesn't live in a vacuum. It has to move between banks, between people, between nations. That's where Stellar comes in. Its architecture is uniquely positioned to bridge CBDCs without compromising their sovereign requirements. It doesn't dictate how central banks must issue currency, but it offers them a neutral layer to communicate with other systems securely, transparently, and instantly. That's why countries like Ukraine, Brazil, and Palau have already explored Stellar for CBDC and national digital currency infrastructure. Because Stellar understands something the rest of the market ignores. To build the future of finance, you don't fight regulators, you work with them. And that's exactly what Stellar is doing. Quietly, strategically, relentlessly. Now, let's talk smart money because it's not just governments paying attention. Institutional allocators are starting to rethink blockchain infrastructure, not just in terms of investing, but in terms of which rails their businesses will run on. For those players, it's not about which coin pumps. It's about settlement finality, fiat to stablecoin bridging, compliance support, chain reliability, and developer ecosystem maturity. And when they map those priorities to the current blockchain landscape, Stellar rises to the top, not because it's flashy, but because it's built for exactly this moment. And that's the playbook Stellar has followed since day one. It doesn't try to win retail waves. It doesn't chase clickbait narratives. It builds and integrates, partners and standardizes, executes and scales. That's why Palago Labs, an enterprise-grade DeFi solution, chose Stellar and Sorabon as the backbone for their tokenized trade finance pilot. That's why MoneyGram partnered with Stellar to offer global USDC on /off-ramps in 180+ countries with zero need for a bank account. That's why UNHCR and international NGOs are using Stellar to distribute direct humanitarian aid, bypassing the friction of banks entirely. And that's why global capital is watching. Because once you realize that Stellar isn't just another layer 1, but rather a quietly embedded component in the operating system of digital finance, you start to understand what's really happening. The market still sees XLM as a coin, but the people who matter, they see Stellar as infrastructure, as a protocol, as a standard, as a financial rail that can move regulated value faster, cheaper, and with less friction than any existing system in the world. And when the IMF, BlackRock, Circle, and central banks all start circling the same blockchain, for different reasons with the same end goal in mind, you know something big is forming. The capital stack is already being wired in. The pilots are already running. The use cases are already live. By the time the media starts connecting these dots, the rails will be fully laid, and Stellar won't be pitching partnerships. It'll already be powering the infrastructure everyone else is trying to catch up to. And XLM? It won't be waiting for headlines. It'll already be in motion. Why the media's quiet and why that's your edge. Here's the brutal truth. The media doesn't report on boring infrastructure until it becomes exciting. They won't cover Stellar until something breaks through, like a massive enterprise integration, a surprise government partnership, a parabolic move in XLM's price, or some kind of catastrophic collapse they can sensationalize. That's the incentive model. It's driven by clicks, not accuracy, by drama, not data. But by the time mainstream media picks up the signal, it's already too late. The smart money will have seen the pattern long before the headline ever hits. The positioning will have happened in silence. The accumulation phase will be over. And the retail crowd will rush in, as usual, when the price is already vertical. That's your edge. If you're watching this video, you're not late, you're early. You're not chasing the candle. You're studying the rails it rides on. And that subtle difference changes everything. Because here's what no one wants to say out loud. The infrastructure layer is where the value actually flows. The sexy narratives? The hype coins? The meme coins and rotating meta cycles? That's just smoke. The rails beneath it, compliance, liquidity, payment corridors, smart contracts with real utility. That's where the economic value lives and grows. And Stellar is that infrastructure. It's not flashy. It's not headline friendly. But it's real. It's fast. It's scalable. is compliant, and it's getting quietly integrated into some of the largest payment and credit systems on the planet. The World Bank, the IMF, the BIS, the UNHCR, MoneyGram, Circle, Franklin Templeton. These aren't just partnerships for PR, they're live infrastructure plugs. And that matters far more than any meme coin trend you'll see go 10x overnight and die by the weekend. The market doesn't reward attention. It rewards conviction. And conviction requires information that most people never bother to dig for. That's where you come in. Every XLM holder watching this should be asking one question. Am I treating this like a trade or like a protocol with trillion-dollar potential? Because that framing is everything. If you're holding XLM thinking it's just some leftover relic from 2017 that never took off, you're going to miss what could be one of the most underpriced layers in blockchain finance. The irony is brutal. The very silence that makes people dismiss Stellar is what gives it asymmetric upside. Because here's how real institutional adoption plays out. It's not loud. It's not fast. It's not sexy. It's slow, methodical, and brutally efficient. It's documents, compliance, integration checklists, testnets, pilots, and phased rollouts. It's custody and KYC, not community pump groups. It's replacing Swift messages with on-chain ISO 20022 transactions. It's digitizing securities and putting tokenized bonds in smart contract vaults. It's regulated institutions using Sorabon not for speculation, but for programmable compliance flows. That's not the story you'll see on CNBC, but it's the story playing out behind closed doors right now. And the market is giving you a chance to front-run it, while it still thinks Stellar is dead. The truth is, Stellar isn't dying. It's maturing. And that's why the media doesn't know how to talk about it yet. They don't know how to sell headlines about sovereign stablecoins piloted on regulated permissionless ledgers. They don't know how to tell a story where the blockchain is invisible. And that's the point. Because this isn't the era of blockchain as speculation. It's the era of blockchain as infrastructure. And Stellar, through the combination of Sorabon smart contracts, MoneyGram's ramp network, Palago's DeFi credit engine, and USDC liquidity rails, is quietly building the blueprint for what the next financial system might actually look like. That's your edge. You don't need to guess where the money's going. You need to follow where the infrastructure is being built. And then you need to position before the floodgates open. Because they will open. Maybe it'll be a central bank pilot using Stellar rails. Maybe it'll be Palago launching trade finance credit markets across LATAM or Southeast Asia. Maybe it'll be the day a major government issues a tokenized green bond on Sorabon. Or the moment when USDC flows through 50 African corridors over MoneyGram's Stellar rails. At some point, something will snap into place. And when it does, the media will act like it's an overnight success. But you'll know it wasn't. You'll know it was 10 years of engineering, planning, diplomacy, and compliance groundwork. You'll know because you were watching when no one else cared. Because you understood what Stellar actually is. A quiet rail with explosive upside if you're patient enough to let the pieces align. So the next time someone says, XLM is dead, just smile. They're reading headlines. You're reading infrastructure. And that's the difference between reacting to hype and front-running value. The media's silence isn't a red flag. It's a green light for those who know what they're watching. And right now, the road ahead for Stellar isn't noisy. It's quiet, but it's being paved with trillion-dollar intentions. So here's the bottom line. Everything the media won't say, you just heard it. Stellar isn't trending on Twitter. It's not being hyped by influencers. But it's being built into by banks, remittance giants, and asset managers. It's executing on a vision that's aligned with real-world adoption, not just crypto speculation. And XLM is still flying under the radar, for now. So if you're holding XLM, understand this. You're not just betting on a coin. You're holding equity in the infrastructure layer of the next financial system. And when that system turns on, everyone will act like it happened overnight. But you'll know the truth. You saw it coming. If you're tired of media narratives and want real analysis like this, smash that like button, subscribe to Be Crypto Smart, and turn on notifications because in this space, early understanding is everything.